Hello there, and welcome to the show. And today I'm going to be talking about Supergirl. Supergirl was released on June 26, 2026, written by Anna Nogueira in her first major movie, and directed by Craig Gillespie in his ninth overall film. This is the second Supergirl movie. The first one was released in 1984, a movie that I have not watched. This is also the second film in the new DC universe and the fourth overall DCU project. As I mentioned earlier, I did not watch the 1984 Supergirl movie. I also did not watch the series that was part of the Arrowverse. I have also not read the comic that this movie is based on. I thought Supergirl was a pretty cool character in Superman the Animated Series, Justice League the Animated Series, and My Adventures with Superman, and I thought the DC universe up until now, for the most part, has been solid. I thought Creature Commandos was great, the second season of Peacemaker for the most part was great, and the Superman movie from last year was solid enough to establish a decent foundation for the new DC universe. The premise of this film, Supergirl is celebrating her birthday on a planet in a red sun solar system, so she doesn't have her powers. And while celebrating her birthday, she comes across a character who's looking for revenge after a group of Mad Max rejects kills her entire family. Supergirl doesn't want help, and the next day, the leader of this group of Mad Max rejects, Krem, he shoots Crypto with a poison dart that will kill him in 3 days, and Supergirl joins this character on her revenge story so that she can get the antidote from Krem. That is the basic premise of this movie. Starting off with the positives of this movie. First things first, the best part of this movie, no question, Jason Momoa as Lobo. I thought Jason Momoa was great as Lobo. Perfect casting as far as Lobo is concerned. Every scene he was in was great. The dialogue, the way he portrayed this character, he was perfect as Lobo. And you could tell that he was definitely having fun with this role. So Jason Momoa was great in this movie. Another great performance in this film, David Corenswet as Superman. He's only in a handful of scenes, and you can tell that his scenes were added to the film during reshoots. This movie underwent 2 weeks of reshoots. I thought Millie Alcock did a good job as Supergirl. This is definitely a different version of Supergirl. James Gunn and the director of this movie stated that this is an anti-hero version of Supergirl. This is definitely a different take on Supergirl, and I think Millie Alcock did a good job with the material that she was given. Seth Rogen has a cameo in this movie, and I thought his cameo was pretty funny. The best part of this movie, in my opinion, are 2 scenes where it shows the backstory of Supergirl. There's a scene where it shows Krypton being destroyed and Supergirl's father, he tears off a chunk of the planet that separates from Krypton as it's being destroyed, and this chunk of Krypton becomes Argo City, like a colony of Krypton in a sense, and I thought that scene was done very well. And the other scene on Argo City where they show life on Argo City and how they're adapting, I thought that scene was done very well. Also, the scene of Supergirl arriving on Earth and meeting Superman for the first time. I thought that scene was great, and to me, that is the best scene of the movie and has the film's best storytelling, in my opinion. And that's about it for the positive. The biggest issue I have with this movie is the script. This script is awful. It is the most generic, by-the-numbers, sci-fi revenge story ever. This movie is every generic sci-fi movie from the last 10 years, every revenge story that's ever been made in the history of cinema, just mashed together and thrown on screen. This script is not good. This movie kept going from scene to scene to scene to scene, and I'm like, what are we doing? There's no sense of urgency, of character development, of storyline progression. There was very little to be emotionally invested in as far as this movie was concerned. Crypto being poisoned and the poison taking effect in 3 days is done just to give an artificial sense of tension for the plot, because this is, once again, the most basic by-the-numbers superhero movie that we've had in a while. Supergirl is very similar to Blue Beetle in a way, in that it is a generic superhero film that should have been released maybe 10 years ago, when superhero films were still at the top of cinema. The writing on this film is not good. Also, the directing of this movie is not good. All of the action sequences in this film are not good. There is one action sequence in particular that takes place on a bus, and it is legitimately embarrassing. That is one of the worst action sequences I have seen in a superhero movie in years. That action scene that takes place on a bus is awful. It is horrendous. Also, the final battle, the finale, there is a moment where music starts playing, and the fight that takes place to end this film is awful. It is as if someone took the worst elements of James Gunn and the worst elements of Zack Snyder and put them together, and that is the final action sequence of this movie. It is the worst elements of a James Gunn movie and the worst elements of a Zack Snyder movie put together. That is the finale of this movie. So the writing in this movie is not good. The directing in this movie is also not good. Also, the villain of this movie, Krem of the Yellow Hills. This guy has to be the most generic, forgettable villain in a superhero movie, possibly the most poorly written superhero movie villain that we've seen in the last 10 years. He feels like a villain from Phase 1 or Phase 2 of the MCU, when their villains were just generic, disposable villains. So the villain in this movie is awful. The ending of this movie feels so underwhelming. When the movie ended and the credits started rolling, I was like, that's it? And the final scene in this movie 100% was done during reshoots, because there is no way that was the ending they had in mind. Also, that ending would have made for a better post-credit scene than the actual ending of the movie. I was not a fan of this film. It is a below-average superhero movie. There are things in it that I liked. A couple of the performances were really good. A few funny lines. But overall, I just did not enjoy this movie. I was bored, I didn't care, and I did not like this movie. This is the weakest installment in the new DC universe by far, and that has been reflected in the box office, because Supergirl opened at number 2 in the box office. It never had the number 1 spot. I watched Toy Story 5 in cinemas, sold out theater in the middle of the week. I watched Supergirl opening weekend. The theater was maybe 30% to capacity. Supergirl was definitely a box office disappointment. It never had the number 1 spot. It opened at number 2 in its opening weekend behind Toy Story 5, a movie that is way better in my opinion. However, even though Supergirl is not a good movie, it is not terrible. There are worse superhero movies. I think this is a better movie than Wonder Woman 1984, Birds of Prey, Justice League, Aquaman 2, Batman v Superman, Madam Web, Joker Folie à Deux, Catwoman. There are worse superhero movies. This isn't one of the worst superhero movies ever made. This movie is more disappointing than terrible. And to me, this movie really should have been an origin movie. This is the first Supergirl movie that's been released in cinemas in over 40 years. And I mentioned the scenes in Argo City, and when those scenes ended, first thing that came to my mind is that should have been the movie. This movie should have opened with Krypton being destroyed and Argo City, showing life on Argo City, and then Supergirl arriving on Earth. Have her struggle to adapt to life on Earth. She leaves Earth, goes on a couple of space adventures, and then you can have the revenge story, except better written. And that should have been this movie. This movie should have been an origin story. In addition to that, they had a great template for a Supergirl origin story, because we've had a great Supergirl origin story in My Adventures with Superman, the new animated series. That is what this movie should have been. This movie really should have been an origin story instead of what we got. There are a few good elements in this movie. Jason Momoa, David Corenswet, Millie Alcock, few funny lines, but overall, this is not a good movie. And by far the weakest installment in the new DC universe. And that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. You can follow me on Instagram at Said_2000, and I will see you on the next video. Till then, take care.